There are two reasons. The first is there's too much variance in clinical workflow between different specialties and different practice settings. The second reason is that billing is king. If you can't bill for it, and if you can't figure out how to bill for it, it's probably not going to happen. And really, both of these two challenges come back to one core problem. And that is that in reality, efficiency in a practice or in a physician's workload is not the most important thing. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about more of each of those in a little bit more depth, because while those two problems and really this whole idea of efficiency isn't important, is king, I do think there's something that we can do about it. And I have an idea that I want to pitch to you about how I think this problem could be solved. But first off, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about why efficiency isn't the most important thing. When it comes to thinking about designing a piece of software or an app, typically speaking, you're going to be looking at opportunities to create efficiency or to, in essence, solve a problem in a more interesting, fast, or creative way than other opportunities or other products on the market. In the healthcare setting, the reason that so many apps are hard to design, or more importantly, the reason so many of them are already designed very poorly, is because of these two problems, the clinical workflow differences and variance and the billing challenges. When it comes to the day-to-day variance, no one specialty has the same workflow. And more importantly, depending on the specialty, the workflow can change day to day or even patient to patient within one day. This leads to hyper-specialized tools. A lot of tools and a lot of apps and pieces of software in the healthcare industry are often very much directed to very specific specialties or very specific parts of a workflow. We still end up with the kind of bigger picture inefficiencies that make it hard for a lot of healthcare organizations to actually want to purchase new apps, because they're only going to see minute improvements or adjustments to one specific part of the workflow that may or may not even be the most impactful from a billing perspective. And this is the second part of our problem, which is that everything that a physician does should either be able to be billed for, at least in the United States, or needs to point to a billable action. There are a lot of things that we could talk about in order of how to introduce and where to introduce efficiency that could be actually really beneficial. But what I'm interested in talking about today is how exactly in a traditional or fee-for-service organization, which is what most organizations still are in the United States, how can we actually design an app to fit the workflow challenges and to help them make more money? For the last 5 years, I've been working on designing something I call HealthcareOS, which is a next generation electronic medical record. I want to focus on the variance in workflow. And I want to hopefully help you think about how you might actually solve this problem yourself. In front of me, I have a handful of manila folders. These manila folders all say things on them. I've got a couple different ones that say patient on them. And I've got two that are just kind of filler folders for now, but they say things like imaging and then problem and medication. These are kind of representative of things like looking at different scans or looking at test results, as well as problem and medication would be more along the lines of like looking at a problem list or looking at a medication list. For each one of these patients, we can have these two folders, and we could have potentially hundreds of folders. If we're being completely honest, we could have a folder for all sorts of different things. For simplicity today, I'm only going to be working with these two. In a more traditional world, we could think about my desk almost as a desktop, right? Like we can look at a desk and say, like, this is where our computer desktop has kind of evolved from. We have things on our desktop. We have different manila folders. Maybe we have a stack of our patient folders over here. We have a stack of some of our other miscellaneous folders. Maybe we also have, something like a sketchbook for like managing communication. Maybe we even have like a phone or something that helps us call people and make appointments and things like that. So, and if I'm going to do things with them, I might place them in different physical orientations. So if I'm going to look at my first patient of the day, I might take all of this stuff and kind of move it off to the side. And then I might take my patient folder, open it up, and then I might take my other folders and open them up kind of next to it or below it or something like that. Now, the cool thing about this is that this is really up to the end user. You're getting all the information you need, but your preference for how it's laid out and where that information is seen is kind of, well, it's your preference. You're not being forced to do it any particular way, as long as you meet the particular outcomes and you do the particular things that are required of your job. No one is sitting here to make sure that you have opened up patient one in exactly the correct way or the problem list in exactly the right way. As long as you're seeing it all and you're making intelligent decisions, you have control here. This is kind of how a lot of us are used to operating. And unfortunately, our computers, and particularly in healthcare, the computer and the apps and software that we use do not help us do these things. Most software, you probably will be familiar, actually has a look kind of like this, where you do have 3 tabs across the top of your page, and you make decisions by clicking on the tab to see the particular pieces of information you need, and then you open up that page. The problem with this is, what if I need to open up this page and I also need to open up this page? How does that work? Well, it doesn't really, because now you have this huge experience that doesn't really fit on a screen, and if it does, it's gonna be really, really, really small. Can we make software to more appropriately resemble this type of kind of physical laid out experience? That's been my goal with HealthcareOS. My solution for this problem, and one that I'm very curious to hear other folks' thoughts on, is to create a system that uses what I call spaces, items, flows, and modules to manage this information. So let's take this from the top. A space is essentially like you might anticipate with a desktop. When you think about my desktop with all of my different tools on it, those tools and the things that I have laid out are dictated by what I need to do in the moment. They're dictated by the task, the thing that I'm managing and why I'm managing it. I'm managing people, patients, over a certain course of time. These are essentially appointments. Or I'm managing people and I'm managing the results of things those people have done, or the tests and things. And that's a separate type of management. But in actuality, they're very similar, because you're accessing the same item or the same type of item, and then you are looking at different pieces of information. And these different pieces of information within an item, I'm calling flows and modules. So within a flow, we actually have an overview module, or appointment, or last appointment, and a note, and maybe some visualization of a flow sheet or imaging or something like that. And those flows all are kind of coming from, well, let's be honest, disparate folders. They're coming from different places inside the product. They're not the same page, and they're not really one page, but they are different relevant pieces of information out of these different folders that are being surfaced in one view to help a user make a decision around the particular intent of that space. And within those modules, we can do things like drag and drop. So if we are looking at a piece of information, let's say we're looking at a reference to the last appointment, and we don't really remember what happened in the last appointment, we could drag and drop the note or a little module or card or something, and then suddenly we have the note from the last appointment available to us. And more importantly, if we are, like I mentioned with my, communication idea, if we need to actually message that patient or send them an email or send a specialist an email or a message, well, we can do that right in line too. We don't have to go to a different part of the product. Now, from my perspective, this handles a lot of the workflow challenges, because as I mentioned with the physical layout, this can be completely customizable. A user can add whatever things they need to do the job they need to do. I'd love to hear how you might go about solving a similar problem. How would you accomplish kind of working through different workflows? Because one of the things about my solution is that it doesn't really address the very nitty-gritty of very particular workflows or very particular specialties. There may still be additional products or apps that need to integrate into something like this in order for it to be more useful. But ultimately, I do hope that it could lead to a new paradigm in how users and specifically clinicians interact with their software and interact with their computers. Let me know down in the comments if you have any ideas, thoughts about what you've seen here. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon. Peace.